The New York Times, this past Sunday, there was an article about the first black punk rock group called Death in the 70s, and they found these old recordings, and they have an album that they put out now. They had pictures of these guys back in the 70s. One of them died, and now I'm dying to hear this fucking group's music. Just
What were they called?
They were called Death.
Have you heard the baby news? Stepping up wailing, shot from the past. All the dreams were flying, all the thought was dying. Heard from the past.
The quick version of the Death story is almost like the tease at the beginning of a movie trailer. 3 black guys in the 70s from Detroit, Michigan, blood brothers.
3 black cats from Detroit played heavy punk, rock and roll.
It's pretty hard to be black playing rock in Detroit because they were sort of stereotyped into you had to be Motown if you were black.
Death's music was definitely ahead of its time. They really predated what we know as the punk movement.
Nobody was making music like that in '73.
They have to be properly credited as being visionaries.
You have a record that is so perfect in its innovation, it makes it all the more shocking that it didn't manage to find a way to come out then.
They're kind of like the unknown soldiers of rock.
They're recordings that they were simply put away.
There's been hardcore history sitting up in that attic, and no one's known about it.
30 years after the fact, we're just now discovering this band that had been sort of lying in wait.
It's such a great story, and it's punk rock.
Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Welcome to my neighborhood, 2240 Little Bridge. This is where Death was born.
No.
This is our old friend that we grew up with.
Right here.
They telling the story about Death. You remember that?
I'm still here.
No. They telling the story about our old band that we used to drive y'all crazy with all of our loud music.
I remember that.
Definitely remember that.
David.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's David. David, you know what? That was David cutting up wherever he is. But you know what? That was my boy, though. Yeah, that was my boy.
He was all right.
My name is David Hackney. I played the drums, and I was born and raised in the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan.
I remember when y'all were teenagers.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's very right.
Yeah.
I'm Bobby Hackney. I am a bass player. My parents, Earl Vonley Hackney and Majora Florida Hackney, 2 beautiful people. I was the youngest of 4 boys. Our oldest brother was Earl. David was born the second. And then it was Dennis. And I came along.
I'm indeed the eldest, and that was ingrained in them also, because I said, never forget, I'm second in command to moms and pops.
Spirituality plays into our life right from the beginning of our roots. You know, our dad, was a Baptist minister.
We're preacher's sons.
Being a minister's kid taught us the word from Genesis to Revelation. I mean, we all became versed in the word.
He always told us, if you try your best in life to keep your promise to God and give God time enough to keep his promise to you.
My old man instilled into us to back up your brother. So all of our lives, we grew up with this idea that, we got to back up your brother.
We made a pact with each other that we would never fight, we would never do anything to hurt each other.
We were all close. I mean, we all were very, very close.
Mom, you got so many grandchildren, you can't keep up now.
I don't try. I got 8 kids. I'm proud of every one of them.
That's right. That's right.
Love everyone.
That's right. And your son,
You wanna see
David,
everybody came from.
I don't know what David is doing up there, but there's a lot of good things going on in our lives because of all this thing.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I know. Dave, we talk about Dave all the time.
I know.
We talk about Dave.
Yeah.
Some of the same things he did.
Oh.
I mean, we were kind of crazy kids. We thought of some games that was really weird. I remember one time we was having a squirt gun fight. Dave hid behind the garage and pistoned his. Just some of Dave's pranks,
David was quite a creative when it comes to things. I mean, he would put together some makeshift stuff that just would work that you wouldn't believe.
He took the telephone one time and pulled wires and pinched wires, and the next thing you know, you pick up the phone, it's, hello, 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 hello. And I'm like, and, we actually have tapes of this. David used that to scare people.
Hello. I need your help. Who is this? Hello. I am from the planet Mars, and I need help. You need help? We need your vehicle. Do you understand?
Whoever in the fuck this is goes straight to hell. You hear me?
We need your help.
Who is this?
Growing up in Detroit, it was a great time. It was that Motown time. That real time when Motown was churning out all those amazing hits. It was just such a bustling town. Well, the presence of music, that all started with my mom and dad. They were always music fans.
This thing right here,
Get down.
my mother used to have a little clock radio, a little gray radio right in that corner over there. Every morning we would sit at the table, eating breakfast, listening to CKLW.
All right.
And they played everything.
Yeah, back in the days.
Aretha Franklin, Bob Seger. And I'm thankful to my mom and dad because they never held us back from listening to music. They would always tell us, enjoy everything.
There's so many people who brought music into the house. I mean, it was my dad who sat us down and made us watch the Beatles.
The minute I saw Paul McCartney singing and playing that Beatle bass, I wanted to play bass and still wanted to sing. And David tuned into John Lennon playing the guitar, and it was David who rallied us to, be a band and get together, and that made him the leader.
That's your first
This is
drum.
my first drum.
What?
Very first drum.
Right.
Right here. I used to put two butter knives on here to make it sound like a snare. One time we had some good luck in our family, and our mother got a settlement from a car accident, and suddenly we had some money. And she gave us kind of a choice of what we wanted to do.
First thing we did was went to Manny's Music, man. Manny's Music! I brought a Rickenbacker guitar and a Fender guitar. David brought a brand new Fender guitar.
Bob went and bought himself an acoustic amplifier, so I had to have the best drums I could find. I went and bought me a Slingerland set of drums.
I had a bass, Dennis had some drums, David had a guitar. We started jamming together.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The first band that we formed as brothers was called Rock Fire Funk Express. Because at that time, we wasn't sure whether we wanted to be a funk band or a rock band.
Makes me sort of wonder, what will the world come to? Yeah.
Rock with a fire, you know, add a little funk in there and just keep on going like an express. But then the Who came to town. And when Dave went down to see them, he was like, that's it. You know, we gotta play this music. This is the music we gotta play.
David, there'd be times I would leave, man, he would have that stuff playing. He'd just be laying there, listening. And then I'd come back and the same thing would be playing.
You know, when I saw Alice Cooper, it was like, you know, all bets are off, man. To me, if we ain't playing this, then I ain't gonna be having no fun.
Rock and roll we just kind of immersed ourselves in it. That's what David called it. He said it's pure rock and roll, man. Not like you're gonna have your one hit, but the pure rock and roll is what they don't play over the radio. You know, that's what David always said.
1, 2, 3, now.
This is the room where death was born. Look at this door right here. Only something like this could come from the mind of my brother.
Oh, yeah.
That's David's thing right there, man. When we used to play, this was my station over here. David was right over here. And this was all Dennis's drums. And then we had our PAs. We just gutted the whole room. And it just made it into this little rock and roll haven.
If it wasn't for our mom, she let us turn our whole entire room into a workroom for music.
She got behind everything we wanted to do. While I'm on camera, I want to say, thank you, Mom, thank you.
And she just made an agreement with us. She said, hey, look, 3 to 6 is your time. After 6 o'clock, you got to cut it off.
All right, now here we go. We're going to get this right.
David, he could practice for hours and hours and hours, literally.
He got to the point to where he played along with just about every album that was in our collection. So he was learning Queen, he was learning The Who.
David had a slogan. He said, if I could play chords like Peter Townsend and play lead like Jimi Hendrix, I am the ideal guitar player.
David's amp was always positioned right here because he liked it like that so he could, you know, roust up the neighbors.
And then there was like some girls, we'd be practicing so loud, then after we're done with a song, we'd hear all this loud knocking on the door. And that was them trying to get in. One day this transpired and David started playing these riffs, you know. You know, we just came up with the words right then and there, you know.
Keep on knocking.
Keep on knocking, you know.
and they're playing in the house, and oh man, they sent people down the street holding their head.
You know, we would start to practice and the doors would slam and the cop cars would pull up because we know that they called them on us.
See, we grew up in the black community, so at that time people were tuning into like groups like Earth, Wind and Fire.
And you know, here we are in the middle of all of this playing rock and roll.
And I mean, it wasn't a rock and roll culture. White boy music.
I mean, the more people tried to talk to us about changing, I think the deeper we went into rock and roll.
1, 2, 3, now!
All of that is pure anger. We are fighting with the neighbors to maintain our identity, and we will not be not heard, especially with David.
People were running around. Turn it down, turn it down.
My dad, Earl V. Hackney, died. Though it was an accident, I think it impressed us a lot in our lives from then on when they described us how he died.
He was an electric lineman, so his job was to climb up the poles, fix the wires. I guess he had a trainee with him one night, and this trainee, I guess, stuck his screwdriver in the wrong place, and he got shocked and it threw him off the pole. So my dad races down the pole, you know, throws him in the back of the car, and they take off for the hospital.
But just so happened, a bar was letting out, and there was a person who was drunk behind the wheel, and they swung right out in front of him.
And he slammed right into her, and he died instantly.
I mean, the last thing that he did before he left this world was a noble deed. He was trying to help someone.
I think when my dad died, it had really a big effect on David, as it did all of us. David became obsessed with a lot of spirituality. Seeing our dad at a funeral, I think really was for the first time that we was up close and personal with dying and the fact that someone that you love, you're never going to see this person in this existence. And that, I think, had the big effect on all of us, but on David probably the most.
Bobby was in school, I was at work. So when we get home, David says, man, I got this great new idea for the name of the band. So he holds us in suspense. Let's run up to the room and find out what this great name is that David then came up with. We're waiting with much suspense, and as soon as he says, yeah, this is the name, dude. Death.
Death. Oh, man.
So me and Bobby just kind of looked at each other as if to say, this dude's gone way off the deep end. I know what I would do if somebody came up to me talking about their band, the name of their band was Death. I'm like, you don't want to, no, I don't want to hear it. But there again, that old thing in the back of your head kicks in, back up your brother, back up your brother.
David always said that our name would have shock value. And we're like, why would you say that? He says, because death is real.
He had so much conviction, so much belief, until we just went along with it.
And that was right around the spring of 1974. Yeah, that's when we became Death.
let your head keep running.
This picture right here was taken in 1975, and from our mother's backyard in Detroit. David looked up into the sky and he saw a triangle. And as you can see, there's a triangle right there. And also there's a face. David said that that was the face of God watching over the triangle. And he used to tell us that was a message to us, you know. Hey, this is what Dave was in tune to. This is what he was all about.
Yeah, but dig it, man. Like, take a death like this now. I'm looking at it, you know, with a spiritual, you know, that way, you know, like a death that's, you know, related closer to God, you know.
David wanted to put a positive spin on death. It's kind of like birth. It's not a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing.
Yeah, well, see, this right here was David's concept. He calls it the death triangle. What it basically means is the three elements of life, which is spiritual, mental, physical. And this right here means it's the guiding spirit. And that's what David said, this right here is God.
The stuff that used to come out of his head was just so, you know, it was original, but you know, when you first heard it, it just sounded crazy.
And when you hear things blowing through your mind, what do you think the ultimate trip is?
Well, let's see. And so I would say that doing what you want to do. Yeah.
Okay, hold on, wait. What if I told you the ultimate trip was death? Maybe.
The ultimate trip. Death.
David, okay, since he's proclaiming the leader of the band, we said, David, we need a contract, okay? So David takes the yellow pages, nails it to the wall, and go gets a dart. He opens it to the music section where you have all your producers and music officers, and he opens the yellow pages, nails it to the wall, takes the dart, and the dart lands on Groovesville Productions. He said, those are the guys we're gonna call. Here's Groovesville Productions.
I always remember these yellow bricks, because this is where the studio was.
Now, Groovesville, they were a production company that handled people like Johnny Taylor, the Dramatics, and their leader was Don Davis, who was just a Detroit music mogul.
Hello, my name is Don Davis. I am a record producer. I am a music publisher, and I am a studio owner, and just more recently, I am the proud owner of First Independence National Bank.
Maybe we should knock on the door and just...
The Hackney brothers came in to my office because before you get to Don Davis, the producer, you had to come through the Groovesville office, which was my domain. I met the Hackney brothers and played me some demos that I just thought were absolutely wonderful.
This was Brian Spears' office, wasn't it? This is the room where Death auditioned for Brian Spears. This is the room.
Still got the original furniture.
He had the tape, he had on this shelf, he had the reel-to-reel tape, and Brian sat at this desk.
I was just blown away by the energy of David Hackney. He just knew that this is what their destiny was going to be.
through a couple of auditions, we ended up signing with them.
And it just so happens that they was running the stellar, legendary recording studio of Detroit called United Sounds. I mean, if you were a musician in Detroit, you knew about United Sounds.
Let's see, I can tell you the exact date they were in the studio. They were in the studio February the 18th. It was a Wednesday in 1975. Death and Legacy are in the studio cutting. It's right here.
We used to just love to come here, man. This is where we spent the entire summer of 1975. We spent it right around, in and around this building, recording that Death album.
The moment that that band fired up those instruments, it was just amazing. I think with every song that they played, the energy level just kept growing and growing because they just wanted to show every bit of talent that they had on every song.
The number one biggest game is when they think number famous, like a race at the top because they want to be boss. They don't care who they step on as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes.
It was amazing to me to see such young players have so much to say through their music.
Always trying to be slick when they tell us they're responsible for sending young men to die. We have waited so long for someone to come along and correct our punches wrong, but the wait's been too long.
Of course, we were the loudest thing that they'd ever seen.
David, he went in there and he showed them what his double-stacked Marshalls could do.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, we hear it, please turn it down.
Exactly.
Once we were pretty much happy with the mixes, I grabbed Don Davis and I said to Don, look, you got to listen to these guys.
I'm like, Brian, have you lost your mind? Nobody is going to buy a song on a group called DEATH. What's the matter with you?
I know the name is going to be a drawback, but you know, I convinced Don that on his next trip we need to start showing the group around.
We got turned down by every major label in the UK. Because, I mean, we had gotten a rejection letter and said, we tried all these labels. He says, as far as I'm concerned, don't even look anymore.
He went all the way pretty much around the world looking for a contract. Everybody turned us down.
The name has really seemed to be a roadblock.
So I got this setting with Clive Davis, and it caused a very interesting stir because they were really focused on this record and they wanted to get involved in it.
The first reaction was, hey, this, yeah, it's great stuff.
Possibly, we may be on the brink of a deal, but there's one sticking point. Clive Davis expressed that he really didn't care for the name of the band.
Brian had told us, he said, you guys might have a record deal if you are willing to change the name.
That sent David into another place. because he had his death concept, and the concept went with the name, and the band went with the concept, and nothing could change.
David, in no uncertain terms, just said, tell Clive Davis to go to hell.
Okay, so David, our illustrious leader, turned the deal down. When that came out of David's mouth, me and Bob had nothing coming out of ours. We were flabbergasted, even though we didn't agree with it in public. Back up your brother. But in private, we had a bitter argument about that. Listen, man, these guys want to give us $20,000 contract in the 70s. You know, that's a pretty big contract. We could have actually just went ahead and changed the name. I mean, how many times are we going to get a contract like this? And, you know, then Dave got mad at us.
If we give them the title to our band, Dave said you might as well give them everything else.
He always believed in the music, and I have to admit, a bit more than me or Bob did, because, you know, we were willing to make concessions. Dave was absolutely not.
And he stuck to his guns. He stuck to his guns, man.
And yeah, I would have changed it in a split second. Okay, I would have. But my spirit was telling me, go with your brother. You know, we just went in the office one day and Brian told us that Don has decided to put a release on us. David just stood there and calmly asked me, says, can I have the masters?
Why not just give us our music and let us walk? And Brian said, hey, no problem.
And I was able to arrange to get the masters turned back over to the group.
So we took those master tapes that he gave us and we printed up 500 45s.
And the reason we pressed those 500 because we wanted to get radio airplay. And it was frustrating because the rock stations that we loved, they would play it, but very sporadically. But we never could get them to play it enough to really make a difference.
And it would happen every time we tell somebody, they say, well, what's the name of the band? And, you know, we kind of do one of those, and then we tell them the name of the band, and we get the same old reaction that we were expecting to get. And, you know, rejection.
We ended up having to just kind of get rid of all of our equipment because we needed money at the time to kind of bail ourselves out of a number of things. And what happened was, our distant relative, his name is Donald Knight.
He says, well, you know, why don't you guys just come up to New England for a couple of weeks, just clear your head.
We didn't even know what he was talking about. We thought he was talking about flying across the Atlantic. We were like, New England, what'd you do with the old one?
We took him up on that offer because basically there was nothing else left to do in Detroit. So we came up here on a 2-week vacation, and we just never went back. We found apartments, and then we eventually bought even musical gear. When we first got to Burlington, David, he wanted to introduce the town to the band.
Well, David went down the street. On each pole, he put a death poster. So I think he had about 500 of them printed up.
I mean, the cops must have just went by every pole he was at and just grabbed him off. Because when the cop came to the door, he said, this is a peaceful town, and we don't have gangs here. That's when I said, Dave, you better come to the door, man. They think you're about to start a street gang. You know, he says, no, man, this is a musical group. This is all about music. He says, well, if you want to get around, if you want to get anywhere around here, you'll change that name. You know, after he left, I just closed the door and I said, that's it, man. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of the rejection. I'm tired of the snide comments. I'm done with it.
We just understood that we tried our best with death. We hung in there from 73 to 1980, dealing with rejection for our name, rejection for our music, rejection for the fact that we were black and playing rock and roll, rejection for the fact that our music was too fast, rejection for so many rejections.
David, he felt the rejection as well as we did. I mean, he knew. I think it was David who came up with the name Fourth Movement. We didn't even listen to the concept or why he came up with the name. It wasn't that, so me and Bob was just like, yeah, okay, that's a good name.
Whoa, whoa, Revelations E. If you looked in the sky, seen a legion of angels, tell me would you then believe?
We just decided to take our rock and roll sound and give it a spiritual concept.
Whoa, whoa, Revelations E. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
And it's interesting because they say that Jesus Christ is the rock. And this this album was, you know, it's all about him and all about, you know, God and Christ. And so it's interesting. We got a spiritual high, if you would, out of it.
There was a campus newspaper, and the name of the article was Rock and Roll, Hold the Religion, Please. And they were saying how good the music was, but how they didn't like the religious aspects that went along with it.
After all the rejection that we had been through with death, there's this big old article in the Cynic saying, nice music, hold the religion, with our picture by it.
Dave took it really personally, and I think he just got fed up with the rejection too. That's when the homesick for Detroit thing started to brewing up.
He wanted to go back to Detroit. He really, literally wanted to ball up everything and take it with him, including us. He wanted us to fold up. But at the time, I mean, I had brought my wife, Tammy, and she had just had a little baby with little Bobby. We just didn't want to pack up and go back to Detroit, you know? So David went back to Detroit.
Well, I am Heidi Simpson, and David Hackney was my late husband. Well, let me see. We moved from Vermont to Detroit in 1982. He wasn't working at that time, I know that. He was staying at home and playing his music to himself and trying to figure out what he wanted to do himself. He just was no typical working person, like out there doing a 9 to 5. And he was a dreamer. He liked, he would sit out on the porch and just look in the clouds and the sky and make pictures out of the clouds.
We went for about 2 or 3 years without a guitar player. We would practice the same way every day that we always did.
Because we was always on the idea that David would come back. As time went on, and we finally realized, well, maybe Dave's not coming back. So me and Bob stayed here, and that's how Lambsbread was born.
No help for right. That's the love, man. Good, man. I told you since today, man. Oh, and now. That's all right.
We looked at each other and said, man, this is a no-brainer. The people love this music. It's ruled by the bass and drums, and that's all we got right now. So it was a no-brainer. That's how we gravitated to reggae.
The love you put inside of me, I know will never fail because it's everlasting.
We was able to find ourselves a booking agent and get on the road as Lambsbread.
We love you, people. So somebody say you want to fire up some ganja. Fire the ganja. Fire up the ganja. Oh yeah. Fire up the ganja. Say what?
And we was actually glad that we had put down the name Death because we thought, okay, now that we got rid of that, you know, things are beginning to open up for us.
Let them know it's true.
That might have rubbed David the wrong way, because at first he didn't really take to the news that me and Bob was forming a reggae band. It was like, oh, well, those cats done abandoned rock and roll. No, man, we were sitting back waiting for you to come, but you didn't come, so we had to busy ourselves with something.
I don't think he was comfortable with the fact that we traded in our rock and roll shoes for reggae. You know, in his eyes, we were still deaf.
When I was young, my father, he was a reggae musician. As a kid, that's all I knew them. I just knew them as reggae musicians. I just knew them as Lambsbread.
We did the same thing that our mom and dad did for us. We just made music available to them.
My Uncle Dennis taught me all the basics of drumming, which was really awesome.
And I used to bring him behind the drum set, and I would put a stick in each of his hands and kind of move his hands for him. And then when Bob had his other sons, when they saw how Bobby played the drums, I guess, you know, all of them wanted to play the drums.
Well, I was always, influenced by my Uncle Dennis and Bobby because, he always had drums laying around in the room, and I kind of caught on to that.
Yeah, my dad and my uncle, they always had a very strong, serious musical connection, and that was something that made a profound impact on me.
Bobby came to me one day and says, hey man, you're turning all of my sons into drummers. You know?
My Uncle Dave, he was really one of my favorite uncles, and he was just always so crazy and so out there and so out of the box.
He just had the best sense of humor and the best laugh, and I used to love talking to him, because he was just so lively and so funny, He was like a child.
The thing that was kind of sad was I never got to see him at his prime. Because he really got into the bottle. He really got into alcohol. So like most of the time that I saw him, he was always drunk.
David, he's one of these genius types, man. The demons get to you. You know what I mean? The demons get to you.
David was gonna do what he was gonna do. And he was hell-bent on that. And nobody was gonna mess with him. And the more that people tried to correct him, if you will, or change him, the worse it became, okay?
He was a visionary. He had a plan, and that plan didn't go through the way he wanted it to. And I think part of his drinking stemmed from not being able to fully express what he wanted to do with his music and his art.
This is part of the diary that David had started. It's just talking about the one day of his life. Check the dreams that are in your mind. Take a flight to see which ones are really there. Open up your eyes and see the paradise of a dream. The world we know shall be no more. That was when David revealed that his music would not come forth until after he had left this earth. I think he was just feeling like he wanted to leave back then. He always was in another world, like he just kept saying that he didn't want to be here anymore.
Hendrix. No, he was never an idol. He was like an influence to me. I don't have any idols, not on this earth. My idol is Jesus Christ. I follow him until the day I die. And then show me how to get up to the orchestra, you know, that's going to play in front of the throne of God. That's my destination. I want to play in front of the throne of Almighty God.
And the last time David was up here, the last thing he did, he filmed my wedding.
All right, we're at the church here. And this is what it looks like inside. There go the groom. There go the bride and her dad. Look at Dennis.
I had a conversation with my mother. She said, you know what your brother David told me? I said, no, what did he tell you? He said, when you get home, get ready to bury one of your sons.
And we noticed that he was frail and that he didn't look that good. And we asked him, you know, is everything okay? And he never said nothing to anybody. Yeah, everything's okay, everything's all right. I'm all right, I'm all right.
I just wanted to say these words because me and my brother Dennis have been through heaven together, we've been through hell together, we've been down in the ditch, we've been on the heights. We've got a great career as musicians, and we're well respected here in the community, and we thank God for that.
But before Dave left my wedding, he brought all the Death Master tapes and told Bob to hold them. He says, one day the world's going to come looking for this, and I know that you will keep them.
And I says, Dave, I have enough tapes. I got enough of our stuff, man. He says, no, he says, you gotta keep these. He says, the world's gonna come looking for the death stuff. And he says, I know that you'll have it when they come looking for it.
That was when he told us, he says, man, when y'all make it with this music, he says, I'm not gonna be with you guys. When I hugged David before he left, David let me know that I wasn't going to see him again.
And then after he got back home a few months later, we got a call from my brother Earl. You know, Earl said to me, he said, he's dying, Bob. I remember that so well, like it was yesterday. I mean, what do you mean David's dying?
David had a pretty advanced cigarette habit that eventually ended up taking a toll on his life.
He says, yeah, Bob. He says he's got full-blown lung cancer. And that just floored me.
Once he hit intensive care, man, it was all over.
David died a day after my wife's birthday. Tammy's birthday is on the 8th of October, and I think David died on the 9th. I just put the tapes in a safe place. I didn't think about them. I was thinking too much about David.
When I eventually went to David's funeral in Detroit, I thought that, I guess that thing is just gone with Dave.
David's dream and the thing that he always said was consistent from day one. And he never wavered in his story, nor his dream. And so, yes, he did carry that all the way up to the end.
My wife used to say that Dave was Dave when he was playing his guitar. If you wanted to see the real Dave, you got to catch him playing his guitar.
You know, David continued to write beautiful music right on up until he died. This right here is the last record that David made before he died. And as you can see, his nickname was Rough Francis. You know, the name of the song is I'd Be Your Doggy. And then it was backed by a song called We're Gonna Make It. And you know who played on this? David did recruit myself and Dennis to help him on the tracks on this. So, you know, this is kind of like the last time that we really got together and made a recording.
Ooh, baby, we're gonna make it someday. Ooh, we're gonna make it.
Now the way that it's been, we've seen thick and thin and dark days all around us. But now that it's over, let our love grow stronger. Don't you cry now, we're gonna make it. Don't you cry now, we're gonna make it. I think that says it all. We've stuck together through thick and thin for 22 years.
Don't you cry, we're gonna make it. Don't you cry, we're gonna make it. Don't you cry, we're gonna make it.
Talk about record collecting, he says. Well, you go by hunches. I mean, I found this in a thrift store. Glenn Schwartz and the All Saved Freak Band with a brain on the cover. I thought, how can I not take this home? And here's my favorite Christian ventriloquist, Marcy and Little Marcy. Don Bowles, formerly the Germs, actually tracked her down and got one of the dolls a while back. Robbie the Werewolf is sort of self-explanatory. This is a regular old lounge guy, but somebody to haunt you in your dreams. Anyway, so when I saw the Death record, the single Politicians in My Eyes, pop up on this one guy's list, buried in everything else, the Northern Soul, as they call it, for ridiculous amounts of money. And there was this little record, Politicians in My Eyes, and I thought, this looks interesting.
I was interviewing Jello Biafra for a book that some friends of mine were writing about the history of band t-shirts. I know that Jello's a really huge punk collector. And this collector friend of mine said, Jello supposedly has a box of the Death single. And I said, what's the Death single? He's like, oh man, it's this all-black punk band from Detroit, and it's super hard to find.
Das was a guy that I'd seen coming into the record store often. He never talked. He was always very quiet, but he would buy really cool records.
I got a record you might be interested in. I'll just give you a copy. It's friends of mine that I knew back when I was, just got out of college. So I gave him a brand new copy of the Death record. He just like, where'd you get that?
He says, hey, my friends gave me these 45s, and they told me to give them out to help promote their band, and I never really got them out there, but it's never too late, so if you could take these home and give these a listen. These guys were friends of mine.
Don Swank, we met in 1976 when we were releasing those Death 45s, and David had commissioned Don to do the artwork.
He wanted a triangle in the clouds. But, of course, they never had the money to follow through on any of this stuff. So basically, I did all this artwork for them that they couldn't pay me, so they traded me records. That's what happened.
So now I got these clean copies of the Death 45 from Das. I left one on the counter here, and Ben Blackwell took that.
So this 7-inch, it's a limited press, it's Detroit, it's punk rock, it's hard to find, and not a lot of people know about it. I mean, this hits all of my checklist. This is something meant for me. So there it is. Politicians in My Eyes, which is the A side, and Keep on Knocking, which is the B side.
Later that night, another record collector told me the value of the record. He had heard of it, and I mentioned it to him, and he told me that, do you know what that thing's worth? That's a really valuable record.
So Matt Smith puts the 7-inch on eBay, and he had it on eBay, buy it now, $800.
How I discovered the Death album was I saw an American Unknown punk compilation, and Death was featured on side B. I was completely blown away. It was such a great song, I was asking myself, why was this band not known? I knew I had to find that record. About a month after I had heard that compilation, I was eBaying and I noticed one for sale, and it was for $800.
The Old Digs Archer record pressing in Detroit. If they knew that something they pressed 30 years ago, 35 almost, selling for $800.
Why would anybody pay $800 for an old Keep on Knocking? I mean, if I had one, I would have gave the guy one.
The idea of something that's been unheard, that excited me. This needs to come out. People need to hear this. This is important. I make some copies. I send them out to people that I know and to some people I don't know. One of the people I made a CDR for was by the name of Henry Owings, and he runs Chunklet magazine in Atlanta. And he posted them on Chunklet's website.
Julian moves out to California, and he is out there just, traveling, hanging out with friends and stuff.
And I had a friend, a roommate, who she used to go to a lot of parties, and she used to go to all these parties where these DJs would spin all these collectors, classics, and unheard of, just anomalies and rare hidden gems and things like that. She came home one time and was like just ranting and raving about all this new music that she had heard, and she wouldn't stop going on about this band, Death. I did a little bit of research, and it didn't take long before I came across this website called Chunklet that Ben Blackwell had posted 2 songs.
The number one biggest game is when they think I'm a friend. It's like a race to the top because they want to be boss. They don't care who they step on as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes.
I heard that song, Politicians in My Eyes, and I heard my dad's voice, and it was unmistakable, unmistakably his.
Look ahead, see them fly, see the twinkle in their eye. Politicians tell me why.
And it turns out that there were these 3 black brothers in Detroit in the 70s by the name of Hackney. And I call up my dad.
And he called me up and he says, Dad, do you realize that they're playing your music at underground parties here? And I'm like, are you talking about Lambsbread? You know, I thought he was talking about our current reggae band. And he says, no, Dad. He said, you were in a band in the 70s from Detroit called Death. And then I just got quiet.
You know, Dad, were you in a band in the 70s called Death?
He says, politicians in my eyes, keep on knocking. And when he said that, I said, that's us.
I'm like, Dad, why didn't you tell me?
And then my brother would call me and be like, Bobby, you're not gonna believe this. Like, Dad and Uncle Dennis and Uncle Dave were in this band called Death. He was telling me about the music, about how amazing it was. It was like the best rock and roll he's ever heard. And then I play the MP3 and my jaw drops. Like I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like my eyes started to tear up. The hairs were like standing up on the back of my neck. I started shaking.
Or am I breaking out, 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 breaking out?
I just couldn't believe it because once I heard it, I just knew it was them. I could feel it. I was like, this is my dad and my 2 uncles.
Everyone's talking, I can't hear a thing. I'm on the moon, why is the sky so green?
I was one of the first people to hear the record, and I could not believe. It was unbelievable.
I think I'm walking up the stairs while I'm sitting right down in my chair. I feel so light, but I'm not.
It was raw punk, and I did not believe it at all. It was really a dream come true.
I was like, I can't believe that I know that I'm listening to like the best rock and roll music I've ever heard. And I'm the only person that knows about this. I started calling my friends.
Bobby calls me up and he says, I didn't pick up, he left me a message. He says, I gotta talk to you, I got some crazy news for you. And he said, yeah, I found out that my dad was in kind of a proto-punk band in like the early mid-70s. And I was like, what?
Then I made him a copy and told him to listen to it. And he had the same reaction I did.
So I post on various message boards, punk rock message boards, and posted a long story about everything I knew about Death, put up links to the songs, and just wanted to share this because I said other people need to hear these songs. That post circulated all over the internet to the point where it got the attention of Robert Manis, who is a record collector.
I was still freaking out over that record, I'd listen to it all the time. And I was just blogging. I typed in Hackney Death, and this blog came up. So I dropped everything that I was doing, and I talked to, a couple of the guys at Drag City.
Well, we were talking to Robert Manis, and so Robert sent over some MP3s of the Death single. It's like 70s garage, like you've never heard it before. Just made us really excited to want to be involved with the record if we could. So naturally the thought turned to reissuing a single is cool, but if there's more material of a similar nature, then you can reissue an album. And that seemed to be the next question. Is there an album out there? Where are these guys? Do they still exist?
Let's give thanks. Lord, we thank you for this food that we're about to receive, and we thank you for our family and all that you do for us. In Jesus' name we thank you. Amen.
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 All right. do for a living is I work at St. Michael's College. I'm on the late night maintenance crew. I've been able to give my kids the choice of going to college, do this job. I've been able to buy a house. To me, it's a good job that I can do while I struggle as a musician. Getting the call from Drag City was really exciting because every musician lives for that day when you get the call from the record company. But after the excitement of that part wore off, you know, it's just bringing up a whole wellspring of emotion. After starting a new band and after just creating a whole new life, all of a sudden, you know, something from the past just pulls you back and say, hey, what about this?
This is where we store stuff. For years and years, most of the death tapes were right here. In this little bin here. This is just the way it was on that day when Bobby called me up and said, Dad, please tell me you have those master tapes. And they were sitting up here, just like this. I was in such a blur about everything. I can't believe that I'm up here looking for the death tape. You know, I mean, that within itself was so surreal for me. This right here is the original finished master tape that was recorded at United Sounds production studios. As you can see, it's my brother David's writing right there. And that was what he wanted to call the album, or that's what Death for the whole world to see. Of course, he put his signature triangle, which basically represented the whole death concept. This is the tape, and this tape has been through quite a bit, you know. It's kind of like older than any of my children.
Pick up the glass.
Then, before I knew it, the album was released.
This is the album right here. Released on Drag City Records, February 17th, 2009. After all these years, 3 cats, 3 young dudes who just love rock and roll music.
Can you imagine taking 35 years? It's incredible. I don't know of a story like that. I don't know of one.
When the album came out, I felt emotional, I felt happy. I was happy for us that our music was finally getting recognized. I was sad, you know, because David was not here to see it. You know, wanting to see something like that really significant happening.
It's kind of hard when you talk about this because you kind of hear Dave's voice in the back of your head. You know, he said it. He said the world's gonna come looking for this music one day. I'm still hearing in the back of my voice all the things Dave said, and they're coming true, and you know, it just feels weird.
The album was released, but since nobody really not many people heard the Death album quite yet, what we decided to do, me, Julian, and Urian, was pay tribute to Death by covering the album and like playing it live.
Hey,
the Death songs needed to have an audience, and that it's been too long. You know, it'd been 34 years since the songs had been heard by anybody.
We did a lot of campaigning, you know, like we were out there spreading the word. We were like almost like musical missionaries for Death in a way. I remember the first show that we played, it was like packed and people were just really excited and happy. And it was like this rush of spiritual energy running through our veins. It was pretty much like speaking to Uncle Dave again. It's like saying, hey, what's up, Uncle Dave? How you doing? Like, I haven't seen you in a while. When we played those songs, that's what it felt like. It felt like he was there with us again.
Whole set goes out to David Hackney. He's a beautiful man.
We were trying to think of names, and Rough Francis came into play when Bobby was thinking about the that old 7-inch that my Uncle Dave put out as Rough Francis.
I was like, perfect. Rough Francis. That's the name of this band. Because it's like, this band is all happening because of Uncle Dave. Like, we're channeling his music, his energy, his art. It has to be called Rough Francis.
So a few songs that you just heard, they're by a band called Death. And that band is our family. Our father, our uncle, and our other uncle. So we're just carrying the torch. And we're just very excited to be up here playing for you right now. Thank you so much.
Your face is funny and your eyes are red. Your face is funny, standing in your head. You're holding something up and sticking grass. Somebody she is stuck up on your ass.
When we were playing one of the songs, I looked over and I saw my father and my mom, and they were both hugging and crying.
They were both just so moved by it, you know? And that moved me, seeing them.
Seeing my 3 boys on stage performing their dad's music, I was just so proud to be their mom, and it was just a wonderful night, and I'll never forget it.
Thanks a lot. We are Rough Francis.
Rough Francis was really impressive. They were a real force on stage, and performing their father's and uncle's music. I know my piece began with Bobby sort of beaming back at the bar. You know, he's got 3 of his sons on stage, and his brother Dennis there, and his wife Tammy's there, and I mean, it was like a family reunion. But and the missing member was his brother David, who was then present, whose presence was really felt through his music.
I think for me, like when I saw the story in the New York Times, it was pretty mind-blowing to see it on that scale.
I was just blown away when that article actually came out, and there was like a picture like this big of Rough Francis. I was like, oh my goodness, like we're in the New York Times, like half the page.
I've never heard from so many people. People's parents were saying they saw this, and you know, like I said, my dentist.
I had a buddy, Matt Sweeney, in New York City, and I think he saw an article in the Times or something. So he actually sent me a disc, and I was checking out. I was like, wow, you know, how did I not know about this? I was like, man, this is badass.
And it's just one of those great music stories. It's one of those things that keeps you going to the record store, hoping for another great story like that. It's why you listen to music.
It instantly became a favorite record. You know, it was sort of, it literally popped out of the speakers, and it had an energy to it and a musicianship that sort of blew my mind.
When I got to hearing Politicians in my eyes, it was like an immediate, like, this is one of the greatest songs I've heard in quite some time, and it really was quite an electrifying recording.
Ramones got all the glory for what this is right here, and this is pretty much the Ramones, but 2 years earlier.
There's no doubt on that record. There's only conviction. There's only full-hearted conviction. And that's really what makes it rock and roll.
When I heard it, I just couldn't believe that I'd never heard it before. It was the predecessor of what punk became, and that was what also compelled me to really want to search them out, no matter how long it took me to find somebody who had a number for these guys.
Joey Ramone's brother, he ended up tracking me down, and he invited Death and Rough Francis to come play Joey Ramone's annual birthday bash. And I'm like, well, Mickey, Death, they haven't really played they haven't played live yet. I don't even know if they would be into it. And then I called my dad. At first, he didn't really know if he wanted to go forth with the project just because of all the emotional ties they have with it, and they always wanted to be really respectful to my Uncle Dave.
Yeah, we were very reluctant because we just didn't want to do it without David.
It actually took a few weeks for us to really take this thing kind of serious, because we had to answer the question about who's going to play the guitar.
David said, if I don't leave any children in this world, you got to remember my songs are my children. I'm committed to taking care of those children.
And at the time, we was working with Bobby Duncan, who we had found to be a guitar player in Lambsbread. As far as the look, he fits. I mean, but should we throw this kind of a load on the dude?
Bobby says, Bob, something's happened, And he was like, he didn't even seem like he could really put it all together, man, but because it was just like such a big thing to him. He says, I hope you want to do it, man, and stuff. And I started listening to the CD.
And he said, not only is the album awesome, man, he says, but I'm gonna try to do David justice. I'm gonna try to live up to the standard that he put down on that album.
And when we got together with Bobby Duncan, we figured, well, Keep On Knocking, that's kind of an easy tune. We could just, throw that out there first and see what happens, He
started playing the music. We stopped. And Bobby, he says, guys, did I do something wrong? If I did something wrong, I'm sorry. And when we turned back around to answer Bobby, he saw that we both had tears streaming down our eyes. Because he was playing it. It sounded like Dave.
And I had to get up and leave out the studio. Okay, I just took a 10-minute break. I just, went out there and did my crying on the side of the studio, and I said, I don't know what's going on here, Lord. I said a prayer. I said, I don't know what's going on here, Lord, but you got to tell me how to walk. You got to tell me how to walk.
That's when I realized it was more than just like playing guitar and covering songs or doing a gig. I realized this is a spiritual thing. This is a deep thing.
You have to understand that session, at that time, that was the first time that we had played that music since about 1978.
Y'all ready?
Oh, yes.
Oh, man.
We have been working for the past 5 months on rehearsal production for a Death tour. That's going to be the first time in almost 35 years that Death has played a show. So we're excited about it.
I still feel like I'm in a dream.
Hey fellas, for the whole world to see. This is our first stop for the whole world. This is our first stop for the whole world. Love you, man. That was for Dave. I love you, man.
I can remember it was you didn't want to see my face. I can remember it was you put me in my place. You get down and now you want to be worth it. Well, I got news for you. That is the wind gonna be. You thought that me and you were just begging. But now you're back for more. And I look like I got going there. I'm sorry, baby. It had to end like this. You know we tried. Maybe we just missed. You know I did. You know I understand. You know I did. You know I understand. Keep on knocking. Keep on knocking on the door. Keep on knocking. Keep on knocking on the door. Keep on knocking. Keep on knocking on the door. Keep on knocking. Keep on knocking on the door.
Thank you very much.
You know, I mean, really, we are enjoying this wonderful thing. But for us, it's a beautiful thing and we're having a lot of fun, but we do carry a tremendous burden with us. And that David had predicted all along that this music would catch on throughout the world. That's one of the things I think that's really bittersweet with us, is that he never got physically the opportunity to see his prediction come true.
Thought nobody in the world would hear this one. David always believed that the world would hear this music.
This whole thing is happening not because of my faith, but all this is happening because of Dave's faith. Dave is the one who said all this stuff was going to happen. We told him he was dreaming. But now we're living it, and that's what's making everything so strange. You know, it's like a movie. And we are the unwitting stars of the movie, you know. And Dave is the director. Even from his grave, he's directing the movie. That's strange.
My mother, David Hackney,
She passed away last Tuesday. And here we are, taking this journey once again. It's kind of reminiscent of the journey that I took in 2000 after David had passed and we had to go to his funeral. You know, the one thing that we're really thankful for is our mother got to see the resurgence of death, and that her sons really did make something out of all that loud music we was playing upstairs all the time.
We all know why we're here. This is the homecoming of our dear and beloved Mother Hackney.
Family is everything to us. Because without family, we wouldn't be here. Without family, we wouldn't have anything that we have. Me and Mom used to kind of have a relationship that was a little bit different from the rest of the brothers. See, I went to my first Motown party with my mom. Okay? But then again, she taught me how to pray. She taught me how to ask God for what you want. She taught me many things that I will never, ever forget. My mother loved all of y'all. God bless you. Thank you for being here.
So I believe, unequivocally, the body ceased to exist, or the body drops its spirit, and that spirit is what we really are. David always said that. He said, this isn't the final stop. It's not over. This is just he used to call this just a waiting room. He said the world is one big waiting room. He said some of us have left the waiting room and some of us are still here.
Pick up the glass.
That's the way he looked at it.
Don't let your head
Yeah.
keep running.
Whatever is behind you, leave it past. Can't you see what's coming? This world's been on its wild, wild trip. It's too far gone to even stop it now. You got the life, you better live it now. Because one will have to show you how it's going to be. Glad when let you off. Of course you won't know really where you've been. Make believe in what they think is real. Just tell me what exactly else they think.
Whenever I say death, I think about my brother David. He convinced us. Not only did he convince us, but he inspired us because we had the chance to change the name. And I think David was the prime example of what the Lord said when he said, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul? And David's music was a soul, and he never wavered on that. And the chance came. Change your name, and I'll give you the world. And David didn't waver. And I'm proud of him. And I love him. And I honor him for that.
You got so hard that you want to be free. But I was thinking further than you see. You made me thinking about being the better man. But you're so young, you don't want to take that step. You can't run, you can't lie, you can't hide your left inside. But time's up, you wasted man, no one will show when you read. You get that love. You run right into a new prison wall. You can't get by if you don't try to change things within yourself. Until then, my broken friend, you will remain on a shelf.
Yes, it's coming, 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 coming from the right hand of the throne, yeah. And His glory, glory, all shall know. All shall know. Yes, He's coming, 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 coming from the right hand of the throne, yeah. And His glory, glory, all shall see.